All right, guys, today we're going to try something different. The Utah Jazz ended up playing their first Summer League game for the 2024 season, and I ended up tuning in just a touch late into the first quarter, but I just wanted to go ahead and do a quick review video of what we saw, what we didn't see, what I hope to see, and some things that honestly kind of concerned me. But all in all, they got the win in very interesting fashion, if I do say so myself. I didn't actually realize what the overtime rules were in the Summer League up until this game. But without any further ado, my name is Wraith Hoops. Welcome to the channel. If you're new and you happen to be a Utah Jazz fan, go in and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications because I do this all year. With that being said, let's go ahead and hop into this one. Putting things simply, it was a very ugly game in the first half. It got really disgusting if you are a Utah Jazz fan. There were at one point 10 turnovers in the second quarter. The second half, they really tightened things up, particularly in the third quarter where they ended up going on a 27-14 run to close out that one. And then in the fourth quarter, they ended up kind of losing the reins a little bit and Memphis got back into the game. We saw a really concerning thing for me personally. I thought there was going to be a little bit better chemistry between two specific people, Keyonte George and Walker Kessler. There were a lot of screen and roll actions. There was a lot of just situations where I thought that the ball was going to get to Walker in a timely manner or get to him in a certain position. And a lot of people, I understand, will assume that Walker just has terrible hands. And to a certain degree, his hands were a little bit more mediocre than I was hoping they would be. But Keyonte also was not feeding him the ball in proper placements, and he also wasn't setting him up well. And a lot of people don't realize how much of an art there is to getting a post-entry pass or just being a roller and properly getting a lob or a pocket pass, trying to make sure that you feed your big man properly and set him up to make a play. Walker Kessler's job is to finish the play, not to be an elite creator out of it. And there was one play in particular, I believe it may have been Isaiah Collier actually, who drove and dropped the ball off to Walker Kessler, but he realized he did not have a play at the rim, kicks out to Bryce Sensabaugh. Bryce Sensabaugh hits a three. Great play, great vision, great knowledge from Walker Kessler, realizing that Sensabaugh's actual defender just slid down there, trying to sneak in there and poke the ball out. I really like that one, but Keyonte George as a playmaker, I do not love. Isaiah Collier as a playmaker, I loved it a little bit more. And honestly, he did surprise me today. We expected the type of control going to the basket. I didn't think he was going to be as cerebral as he was. It took him a minute to get there because the offense that the Jazz seem to be running is very simplistic, and I didn't like it. I kind of hated it, particularly in the first half. Third quarter, we saw a little bit more. I think part of it was Keyonte being that point guard type of player. He was a good leader. He did have great energy. Defensively, I liked what he was bringing to the table last year. I was very critical of him defensively because, in my eyes, I didn't see how he could learn from Chris Dunn and not be moderately okay. But some things just take time, and he was a rookie, so give him that fair chance. He was very confident. He was defensively there and present. Screen actions, I liked how the guards were trying to fight through. I did not like how they were not getting proper communication from the person who was setting the screens, man. I didn't like how Walker Kessler in a lot of actions would allow Zach Edey to go above the three-point line, screen Keyonte George or Bryce Sensabaugh or whoever was on the ball handler, and literally offer no resistance up until probably halfway up the paint. That cannot happen. I understand this is a Summer League game and we can't make too much of it, but to me, that's a mental thing. I've played in the NBA for an entire 2 seasons now, and I understand how pick and roll coverages should and can be run. There was a couple times where actually Zach Edey would set the screen, the man would clear the screen, leaving the defender behind the guard, and then Zach Edey would sink down in the paint and shield Walker Kessler away from the ball. So that gave him a free run to the rim, and Walker's poor communication as to which side the screen was coming from, as well as backing down from the free throw line instead of staying up and giving some sort of resistance to at least make the guard think, kind of hurt the Jazz, and that was free buckets that should not have been there. Fair play, G.G. Jackson has some really good run. He missed a lot of threes, though. I thought he was playing a little bit better than he was until I looked at the box score. The man was 6 of 20 from the field, was held to 0 of 10 from beyond the arc, which is freaking crazy. They were 7 of 36 overall. That's 19.5% for those at home. Zach Edey was battling it with Walker Kessler. Good God. Like, I knew he was going to be good, but I didn't think he was going to be this good. It showed me how weak Walker Kessler is. Zach Edey, I assume he outweighs Walker Kessler by a bit. it looked it, and he looked just stronger. It wasn't just the big Kenneth Lofton kind of weight. It was the I'm gonna do something with this. At the end of regulation, we saw a play where Filipowski gets subbed in, and his job is to replace Taylor Hendricks at the upper block area as the person screening out the one and only Zach Edey alongside Walker Kessler. So they were going to do a double box out kind of action off a free throw. Well, in my head, it was a learning experience. But to me, I don't think you put him in that situation because you had Taylor Hendricks there at the high block and right there at the free throw line, either way you wanted to run that action. So instead of just communicating to him, hey, box that out, don't let him out muscle y'all because he's been out muscling Walker Kessler all night. Don't let him sit there and turn that corner and get there and get great positioning because Walker's going to have his hands full. So if he forces him middle and you offer no resistance and he just shoves you off, that might be an easy tip depending on how the ball goes. There was a perfect bounce and there was a discrepancy with the timing, but it doesn't get the clock rolling until obviously he touches the ball. Fair play. A lot of people thought it was when it hits the rim, which is not the case. But the ugly part was Filipowski had to learn a lesson because he did not box out Zach Edey. And I think part of it was because he's never really spent time in that upper area. Usually, obviously, coming from Duke and being the 5 at Duke, he was on the low block. He was the lowest man on a free throw. So he can box out down low, but he didn't often find himself in situations where he was boxing out high and having to pincer somebody effectively and sandwich them in to prevent them from getting the board. And because he doesn't have that experience to a very high degree, he didn't know what to do. And Edey just saw him sit there and try and shove, rim right to the rim, tip into OT. Now the Jazz did end up pulling it off in the end, which was good. But I don't really blame that too much on Filipowski. That's more so a coaching decision. I believe that Bryce Sensabaugh or even the likes of a Taylor Hendricks, who was already on the block, would be much better suited for that just because last year they spent a lot of time in that particular issue, in that particular situation. Excuse me. But I didn't really love it from a standpoint of putting somebody out there because you think it's going to work. That wasn't going to work. And it showed. Walker did end up in overtime and in the fourth quarter specifically box out a little bit better. He did front Edey a little bit, played him a little 3-quarter defense instead of sitting behind him because he realized, hold on a second, I can't let him get the ball because this man's low-key working me. And Edey was doing him to the tune of 7 of 12 from the field. He had 15 boards, 4 of them being offensive. He had 4 blocks. He did have 3 turnovers, but he was just really getting after it. Now, the foul counts were absolutely insane, but it happened. Scottie Pippen Jr. was also giving, in particular, if memory serves me right, it was Keyonte George and Darius Bazley some good work. He was giving Isaiah Collier some good work. But I like the way that the guys rallied around, particularly Darius Bazley. Now, his numbers overall were not terrific. He was 3 of 4 from the field, played 25 minutes, had 9 rebounds, but the defense that he was playing was very impressive to me, and that was essential. Kenneth Lofton ran a little bit of the 5 to allow Filipowski to run the 4, which I thought was very interesting, very cool. It didn't really yield anything too crazy in that time. The box score plus minus for Kenneth Lofton was 0, but overall, I like the ability and the willingness to experiment, especially right now, because these games don't mean anything to a significant degree, but it is a very good feeler. Now, Filipowski didn't hit any of his shots, but one thing I loved was even after he went 0-4, all of them being from me on the arc, the coaching staff on the side, I heard somebody literally audibly over the mic say, hey, keep shooting. And I think that's a big thing for him that's going to be going forward because he does have that ability to shoot the 3 ball, but he has to see one go down. He didn't get one to go down. Somebody who was struggling in the beginning was also Taylor Hendricks, who ended up going 0 for 5 to start out his stint on the floor. He did end up hitting a little putback layup. He did end up hitting a 3, which was really big off a Keyonte assist. And then he ended up getting another lay later on, along with the free throw. So I did love that for him. It just took a while for him to get going. Defensively, he was present. He was there. He did get caught in a little bit of a conflicting situation multiple times in pick and roll coverages, and more so just splitting the difference between a man in the wing and a man in the corner. And that gave him a little bit of trouble. But overall, I really like what I saw from him. Bryce Sensabaugh, though he did in the game being 5 of 12 from the field, he was 3 of 7 from 3. I really liked what he brought from a rebounding standpoint. He had 6 boards, 2 of them were offensive. He had 15 points, and honestly, that was the most efficient double-digit score that we had, aside from obviously, like, I guess Walker Kessler, who was 3 of 5. He was 4 of 8 from the free throw line. 2 motion jumper. He held it at the top for like a half a second, and I don't love that. I like an even transition flow, and I thought he was going to get that jumper a little bit better. Today we saw him stand in a lot of pick and roll situations just outside the 3-point line, waiting to do a little give and go situation. And Zach Edey was not respecting him being out there at all. He was just sitting there right beneath the free throw line, unfazed. And that was interesting. But I would like to see him develop some sort of mid-range jumper or just get, 65% from the free throw line. That would make me feel a lot more comfortable. He did have 5 blocks today. There was the one that ended up getting overturned, which was for good measure because he did jump straight up. But overall, it was messy. It was messy. I wanted to see more of Cody Williams. I saw a decent bit and I saw him being willing to create for himself, and I loved that. I liked what I saw from him defensively. Obviously, he's more wiry, so there was a lot of matchups that were not preferable to him. But overall, I liked what I saw. I just wish I saw a little bit more. He played the least out of the starters. He only played 20 minutes. And there was actually only 2 out of the 9 players in the game entirely that ended up playing less time than him, both being Kenneth Lofton Jr. and then Flip. Isaiah Collier, like I said, he ended up being 5-11 from the field, 2-5 from 3, 2-4 from the free throw line, had 6 rebounds, had 6 assists, had 3 steals, only had 2 turnovers. The man was cooking, and to the tune of 14 points, I loved it. And he showed me a level of maturity that I was hoping we would see, but I didn't know if I would actually get it. And I think that's the part that really boosts him for me. I give this performance for him. This is like an A- if I'm going to be quite frank with you. He wasn't getting done up on defense. Defensively, he did have a couple issues, a couple lapses in judgment, and those high screens were really giving him a little bit of hell. But I really loved his performance today. I think that was my home run hitter out of everybody. My biggest faller was obviously Walker Kessler, just because I watched him battle out with Zach Edey, and Zach Edey was giving that man work, and it made me very unhappy to watch. But that could be 2 things. One, obviously, he's not used to dealing with people with his particular skill set and people actually feeding the big in that way. 12 shot attempts from a center effectively is kind of a lot, especially when you think about where those type of shots come in today's game. You think of Jokic, you think he's working his way around the court. You think of Embiid, he's an outside, inside kind of guy. Zubac doesn't get that many types of post touches, and there aren't that many bigs that are really sturdy in that way that will have the opportunity to do that sort of thing to Walker Kessler. That said, he needs to get in the weight room. He needs to get stronger. If he has to either get a lot stronger or he has to get a jumper that's smoother. I need one of the 2 this year. Like, it's a guarantee. I'm not super high on trading him. I understand why you would want to, but I think that he deserves a little bit more grace and the opportunity to prove that he's not able to produce for a substantial period of time instead of just it being a situational thing. And I think that the Summer League is going to be a good way to show if he has that dog in him. I saw him fighting out there. That was the one thing that was going to be big. I knew Zach Edey was going to give him trouble because they were going to give the ball to Zach Edey. And he's not used to experience that very high. He didn't get caught in too many high pick and roll coverages where he actually went up, which I really wanted to see him work in that situation. But I understand why they didn't do it. I think that ultimately him being willing to get more handsy, to fight through contact, to lose some balls on passes, but still trying to go up, still trying to make the right play. That's going to be the Walker Kessler that I want to see. No matter how terrible the performance is, I need to see the dog come out of Walker Kessler. And today we saw a little bit of that. We also saw him get a good block, but he ended up out of bounds and then came back inbounds just to get posterized by Zach Edey, who for the first time ever showed some emotion and started scratching his head and making a smiling face. I was like, wow, dang. But all in all, it wasn't a terrible performance for him, but to me, that's a C. Like, yes, 3 of 5 from the field, 4 of 8 from the free throw line, 6 boards, 4 of them being offensive. He had 5 blocks, which led the game, but not the perfect show that I was hoping for. And to close things off, obviously I talked about most of the guys that were important. I wanted to focus on the Jazz because the Jazz were the most obvious. They were the winners, and they were the ones that needed to win. Keyonte George, though, last little blurb for him because I felt the way. He was smiling. He was having fun. I love that. I didn't like how we were losing a lot of the game, and he was still smiling and cheesing. But ultimately, we ended up winning, and his motto, or at least from the commentator's perspective at the end of the game, was there any doubt? To me, there was. Because I saw Zach Edey, yes, Keyonte initiates a little bit of physical contact, but the ball's not gathered, the ball's coming up, and I see Zach Edey push the ball against his wrist, effectively, and then his hand slides up, and Keyonte loses the ball, and they called a foul there at the end of the game. And that's effectively what won the game because he had 19 total free throw attempts. And he hit both of those to close it out. Now, fair play. We know he can shoot. He just was not hitting today. He was 5 of 21 That's underneath 25%. I think that's like 23.7, 23.8, somewhere in that range. He was not hitting his shots today. I didn't think he was going to have a terrific shooting game, but he had a bad shooting game. He was 3 of 10 from beyond the arc, which means he was effectively 2 of 11 inside the arc, which is scary a little bit. He wasn't carving things up the way that I was hoping to. He was very good at navigating screens today. I do want to credit him for that. But as far as what he did when he got to the rim, he just wasn't able to finish. And there was a very unfortunate large sample size of that, because the next highest number of shot attempts was Isaiah Collier with 11 and Bryce Sensabaugh with 12. And Bryce Sensabaugh hit 5 as well, which is more efficient. And then guess what? Isaiah Collier also hit 5. So when you take almost double as many as those guys and you don't hit anymore, it's kind of ugly. He was 17 of 19 from the free throw line. I wish they gave us that whistle every game. I'm not going to lie. Because some of those calls, I was like, I appreciate it, ref, but let the guys play a little bit. But ultimately, he was attacking lanes. He was getting battered and beat up a little bit. So it does stand to reason that he would end up drawing a significant number of fouls. To the tune of 19 free throws, not in my head. In my head, I was thinking more 12-ish, maybe 13, which is still a massive number, by the way. But he did capitalize on those free throws, and ultimately that's what closed the game out. He had 4 defensive rebounds. He did end up working his way up to 4 assists. I think going into the fourth, he only had 2, and considering he would start the initiator of the offense, that was kind of ugly, because he had Cody Williams, Taylor Hendricks, Bryce Sensabaugh, and Walker Kessler on the floor with him to start the game. And then you had obviously Isaiah Collier kind of commanding that second unit alongside Bryce Sensabaugh. But him being unable to properly create for others was glaringly on display today, to the tune of him also having 5 turnovers to those 4 assists. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but Bryce Sensabaugh had 7 turnovers, which was terrible. But I liked the growth that I saw from him defensively, and offensively, he wasn't missing too many shots. I liked the 15 that he gave. And honestly, I've seen a side, I don't know if it's because he cut his hair down or what, but I see a more locked in Bryce Sensabaugh, like somebody that cares when he's on the floor. And I didn't really see that last year. Like, I saw him play with a certain level of intensity, but this was something else, and I enjoyed it. I just hope that he continues to build on his game. Again, not to rag on Keyonte George too crazy, but he did struggle a bit. And by a bit, I do mean a lot of it. 5 turnovers and, 16 missed shots to only 5 makes and 4 assists is kind of crazy. An interesting 30-point game to have, but, they got the win. The Grizzlies put up a good fight. It was very impressive to watch. Scottie Pippen Jr., really great game. Zach Edey, really great game. Wells didn't have a great game. Gigi was struggling a bit. LaRafia was struggling, and the bench was but they were just there. With that being said, let me know what you guys took away from this game. What do you expect to see from the Utah Jazz guys coming up forward before we actually get to the point where there's a lot more training camps, a lot more actual inter-team chemistry? Do you feel like this gave more AAU feel, or do you think that there's a couple guys that were diamonds in the rough that were ready for that next step, or are NBA ready at this very moment? With that being said, go and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and become a member of the channel or donate to help support the content. As always, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. And as always, good morning, good evening, and good night. No matter where you're on the globe watching, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.